I'd like to introduce Mr. Kent Frizzell, who will be introducing Scott. My name is Frizzell Walton, by the way, the sheriff's wife. Mr. Frizzell is a retired professor of law from the University of Tulsa College of Law. While at TU, he was director of the National Energy Law and Policy Institute from 1977 to 1993. Kent and wife Shirley grew up in Kansas, where he was elected Attorney General in 1968. In 1972, he was appointed by President Nixon as Assistant Attorney General of the U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C., and was Chief Government Negotiator at Wounded Knee, South Dakota in 1973. President Ford appointed him Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of the Interior, Washington, D.C. He served as a member of the Reagan-Bush Transition Team in 1980-1981. Currently, he's president of Home of Hope, a nonprofit provider of services to developmentally disabled adults in northeastern Oklahoma. But more than all of these accomplishments, don't get up yet, Kent. He's a great family man and a husband to Shirley for 55 years. They've raised 5 children together here in Claremore. They're still active residents in Rogers County. And Mr. Kent Frizzell.
Thank you, Rose. Everybody here back towards the backside, nothing worse than sitting in an audience, whether it's church or wherever, not being able to hear. Now you're going to have to excuse my sheets and my yellow pad. We've got such a terrific candidate, I didn't want to forget anything that I wanted to say about him. I am pleased and honored to be here supporting the candidacy of Scott Walton. I think he's not your ordinary candidate. I think he's an extraordinary man. Amen. And candidate. Now some people wonder, well, what are you doing spending time supporting your local sheriff, Frizzell? Let me tell you, there is no other office in any community, city, or county any more important than the law enforcement chief officer of that county. Now, we're entering this election period looking at a primary, a contested primary. Almost a little more than just 2 months away, folks. Now, I know most of you are friends, long time, and knowledgeable about Scott and his family. But there may be some here that aren't as well acquainted with him as you are. And as such, there are a couple of things that are primarily necessary to know about a candidate. Who is he? What are his qualifications? Well, let me share with you who this guy is. If you and I were sitting down and drawing out the qualifications for the perfect candidate, I'm convinced it would spell out Scott Walton. It doesn't hurt on who he is that he happened to graduate from Claremore High School. Has an associate's degree from Rogers State University, a bachelor's degree from Northeastern State University, and I might add a blockbuster wife named Rosalie. Not to mention 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. I think, are any or all of them here? Rosalie? Introduce these 2 sons or grandchildren that are here.
1 son, middle granddaughter, Scotty, my little grandson, is somewhere here. Right there, Scotty Wayne.
suppose there are those among us who would like to know, what affiliation does he have with the church? And I might add, unlike our president, whose religious affiliations and are somewhat a little fuzzy, Scott and Rosalie have been members of the Mennonite Church, the Eden Mennonite Church in Inola for 30 years. By the way, Scott, do Mennonites believe in voting?
Yes, we do.
All right.
We got cars, electricity. We eat good.
The reason I ask is because when I was running for office, I had members of my own family that said they were supporting me all the way, and then I found out they belonged to a denomination that didn't believe in voting. Now, in addition to wanting to know the candidate and his or her reputation, it sure helps if the professional qualifications and experiences of the candidate in law enforcement. Listen to our candidate's law enforcement experience. 27 years of distinguished service with the Tulsa Police Department, starting in 1981. With that department, he held assignments as detective, special investigations, mounted patrol, K-9, street crimes, school resources officer, public information officer, Citizens Crime Commission coordinator, and Tulsa Crime Stoppers. And as we know, happily and with gratitude, he's been sheriff of Rogers County the last 4 years. There isn't another candidate running for sheriff in the state as qualified. Now, we're only, as I mentioned, less than 3 months away from the primary election. What do you have to do when you know you've got the right candidate to make sure that he gets elected? 2 things. And I'm going to talk about the tough one first. It's called contributions. When you know you've got the right candidate, how would it be that in a little over 2 months, we all got together again and we found out that Scott's opponent outraised him, outspent him 2 or 3 to 1. And I'm not talking about the amount of money. It doesn't matter. The amount of money doesn't make any difference. It's the contribution that counts. Because whether you give 5, 10, 25, 50, or 100, once you give a contribution to a candidate, you're with him for life. And you're more likely to talk to your neighbors, make sure your own family votes, and go out and campaign for it. And the second thing is, you've all heard it, we've all seen evidence of it, and that is the old adage, every vote counts. We had an example in Tulsa just last week, wasn't it? For state representative to the state legislature, one candidate said, I won by 2 votes. They had a recount and his opponent said she had won by 1 vote. Now, they dug out a couple of ballots out of the bottom of one of those new voting machines, and the original guy said, I won by 1. But that's evidence of how important every vote does count. I have another example. I've shared it with Don Hall and some, maybe others here. Personally, when I turned 21, voted in the first presidential election. Back then they didn't let 18-year-olds vote. So at 21, I voted for Eisenhower the first time around. But I also ran for precinct committee man in Sedgwick County, Kansas. I worked the polls that day. I went home that night. There was my mother, my grandmother, 2 uncles, and a brother. All 5 Democrats. And I had outvoted them all. Because I voted and they didn't. No, every vote does count, folks. And I've gotten acquainted with this man, Scott, and his wife, Rosalie. And I know that he will do everything in his power to ensure that the trust that you and I have in him will be well spent. Thanks for coming tonight.